Hello, and welcome everybody to an episode of The Rare Agent. Today, we are taking a legal take on this episode with Mark Morris. Mark Morris is a real estate lawyer in Toronto and throughout the GTA. He runs an extremely large Facebook group and has an exceptional following on social media. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much. Really a pleasure to be here, guys.
Thank you for coming in. Very excited.
We're really excited to get some good legal knowledge. We haven't delved into that part of the industry yet, so you are the perfect professional to have with us. Mm-hmm. And before we get into all the nitty-gritty of the industry, we would love to know, where did it start for you? Why the law?
Why the law? Well, I should tell you guys, I'm an agent as well. So I'm a broker. But I was a lawyer before I was a broker. And I never really saw myself as a lawyer to begin with. I ended up in real estate quite by accident, just because there were some business opportunities there. I found out that I really liked it. And then I spent some time teaching down at the OREA when the OREA was a thing for education. Really love education, so that's kind of part of what I do every day. And got down into, I guess, got my hands dirty in law really about 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I ran my first sizable firm. So we established a contract with Walmart and Loblaws, and we started a firm called, my business partner and I at the time, started a firm called Access Law, which is located, by the time I left, we had 14 locations and about 75 employees. And in doing that, I was, I guess, the chief legal officer at the time. That really was my role. Found out I loved it, found out I had an aptitude for it, and now here we are on podcasts.
Amazing. So you said there were some opportunities, but why did you decide to focus on the real estate side of the industry? What made you realize you loved that to lead to being a broker as well?
So real estate is something that's been of interest to me my whole life. To be very frank, I like individual transactional law. I like solving individual problems, and I like the rush that comes with dealing with 10 files in a day. It suits my disposition. I really handle stress quite well. It's a fairly stressful environment. And if you can handle that stress and if you can ultimately deal with these people and feel that you're helping every person whose file you touch, then you feel good at the end of the day. And so I suddenly realized that I had something that was paying very well, that was making me feel really good at the end of the day where I was helping people. What more could someone want?
That's awesome. And then at what point did you transition into also the teaching side of things? Was that just a natural evolution, or was it something you'd always kind of hoped to engage in?
Well, the teaching thing, I think that stems from enjoying the melodious sound of my own voice. So the teaching thing was something I did a little bit when I was in school myself. And then I started teaching down at the OREA. Now I teach down at law schools. So actually right after this podcast, I'm going to teach my advanced real estate course down at Ryerson, or whatever they're calling it these days, TMU, right? Yeah, they're calling it TMU. I should probably know the name of the university.
It's a little tricky to catch on.
I know.
It's like when they change the Sky Dome, it takes a minute.
You know, it's actually called Toronto Moo it's mark.morris@torontomoo.ca. I can't, Ryerson. All right. Anyways, we'll go into a branding discussion later on. I generally found that teaching, I get as much from as I think the people who are listening. It helps me understand what it is that I'm doing on a daily basis. It helps me contextualize what I'm doing, helps me understand why I'm doing it. And actually, I find that through teaching, I actually learn the craft of law better than I think I would if I was just practicing alone. So the reason I'm doing this is my second time teaching down at TMU. And the reason I did it this time was specifically to solidify the learnings from last time so that I really internalize it, know it, and then can incorporate that as part of my practice.
That's awesome. They always do say the best way to learn is to teach, and
that
seems to be true for you.
The students do call you out when you really don't know what you're talking about, which is not unoften.
Fair enough.
So like waiting for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you had pretty strong success fairly early on in your career, which has obviously continued forward. What do you credit to the speed and the magnitude of that success with your multiple practices and whatnot that you built?
It's well, first off, I don't want to pretend that it's been uber success, and certainly there wasn't success in the first couple of years. First couple of years, similar to a broker or anything else, was kind of trying to find yourself and understanding how to survive just based on the cash flow that was coming in. Part of the reason I was actually acting as a broker and a lawyer at the same time early in my career was just to pay my mortgage and to kind of get things going. And you really don't understand what's going on or anything else. But if you can survive those first couple of years, and if you listen and you meet good people in the industries and, adhere to what they say and watch how they practice, then you develop your own skill sets. And that, plus being personable and engaging with your clients, that's the secret to success. It's really making sure that your clients understand that you care about them, that you spend the time necessary to ensure that you're touching every file so no one walks away saying, I never even saw my lawyer. Or my real estate agent or anything else, though that's probably harder in a real estate agent sense. And in doing that, what you're doing is you're providing an enduring value to people. That enduring value is eventually recognized as you kind of go more and more senior in your career. And the compensation follows.
Amazing. And then one final question with regard to that growth. You've been around for about 12 years or so. How have you seen the real estate side of things change in that time frame?
So not to correct my host, but I've been around for 25 years.
Oh, okay. So just double it up.
Well, no, I was called in not even 25, so don't feel so badly. I was called in 2001 is when I graduated law school, and I've been an agent since 2006. You're asking how I've seen the profession change or how I've seen the market change?
Either, both, whichever you prefer to speak to.
The profession has gone through, so all professions, this isn't just real estate agency, this is real estate as a profession. It has in some ways become much more professionalized and in some way much less professionalized, and I'll explain both angles. It has become far more professionalized in the form of higher costs driving people who really understand their numbers and their performance. It used to be the case that anyone was able to get into real estate and building because they ended up with a piece of land that was $30,000 and boom, they could screw that up anyway from Sunday because they weren't a builder and they didn't know what they were doing. Now there's only professional builders who can even compete in the space because buying the land in the first place takes so much money. And so the professionalism of the building class is something that we have seen take place over the course of a decade or more. Conversely, in the professions themselves, that is to say law, real estate, brokerage, and mortgage brokerage, we have seen declining standards. And those declining standards is not because of our professional bodies or because of any of the individuals around this table or anyone that we interact with. Rather, it's just a simple function of market forces. If the market continues to go up, all mistakes are covered up. There's no screw up you can make. You can overbid for a house, and in 2 years, it's not an overbidding. You're able to exit that mistake. Someone sets you up with a bad mortgage, no problem, still makes sense because in a year, you're able to actually refinance and take out money. And so mistakes were covered up. They were not revealed. And as a result, more and more people were able to flood in. And of course, the pot was very lucrative. So what we've seen over the course of particularly the last 5 years, but certainly over the past decade, is the professions expanding and people not really being culled the way that they ordinarily would in a normalized market. Now we're entering into a very different market, and we're going to see the exact polar opposite where professionalism is brought to bear, and those people who adhere to professional standards ultimately are going to be the ones that survive and thrive in this market force. But if you're asking what I've seen in the past decade, those are the two trends. They're both they're different directions, but they're both markedly about to change as well.
Really well said on how you see the market changing, because you're right about that. Like there's things that I've said in negotiations or tables, and you're like, it's when you're ready to sell, it's going to be okay. Like in 5 to 7 years from now, when you're ready to move on, it's only going up from here. Or, you use those lines to make people feel okay because they are spending a crazy, like a really high amount of money that you try to make them feel better. But those lines now are not going to be used. Like you can't use them now. You have to kind of just be real and give them the information, and they do what they want with it. So I really resonated with me what you said about that.
Sure.
That you couldn't get in trouble.
And the lines you were using before weren't wrong either, right? I mean, lines you were using were exactly correct because in an upward-facing market where interest rates were heralded to be low for a long period of time, and thus this was the primary investment available to Canadians, you're correct. Fundamentally, the values were there.
It even drips into like our next topic of PreCon, where people were buying pre-construction and like, oh, you got to get in for the first sale or in the primary launch because the next launch is going to be more expensive, or the builder is not going to sell the units less than what they sold them for like down the road. Where that's what we're seeing now, where people are just, it's a fire sale with assignments that people have purchased. So going into our next topic was, what does the pre-construction market look like right now in terms of closings?
In terms of closings.
Like what's the landscape
So what
like?
you're asking me is pre-con deals that are already firm that are set to close.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are reaping what we've sown. And now what we've sowed is not something that anyone has wanted to admit to, but we industry professionals kind of knew was the case all along. For the past 5, 6, 7 years, every person who's walked into my office, I have asked them a very simple question. I've said, what's the purpose of your pre-con purchase? Is it to rent? Is it to live there? Or is it to assign?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know how many people tell me assign? Absolutely none. I mean, some of them said as a secondary issue, I may want to assign, but absolutely no one was ever purchasing to assign, despite the fact that 30 to 40% of people were all purchasing to assign. Mm-hmm. And the reason that they said that is because they realized what it is I wanted to hear. They were under there was no fire under their rear to basically tell me the truth. And so they just told me what it is that they thought I would want to hear, that I might choose to assign, but I'm going to rent it. I'm going to decide what's going on. In truth, these people knew that they had to assign, many of them, because there was no viable way that they could afford the project. The stuff that we have seen and that is now very evident and that is coming into our office, particularly over the past 3 weeks, is really epic. Like people with $100,000 in combined income who have 3 properties and 2 contracts. I mean, how that was a real circumstance from last week.
What?
and so you asked and you said, well, didn't you have to pre-qualify? Oh yeah, well, my mortgage broker gave me some forms and I used that 2 or 3 times on different projects. And of course, those projects never checked if these forms were ever used previously. I mean, these are people whose only option was to assign. And this is true of many, many people. Most people, not most, many, many, many people who were doing this as an investment opportunity were doing so on the backs of their HELOCs, which have now exploded through the roof and which Offspring has actually started to reduce. And they have no viable chance of assigning. Now, while the market for assignments were liquid, that wasn't a problem. They were able to get out of their position, even at a small loss. But the problem is that we're now entering into an illiquid market stage in the assignment area, meaning that you can put it up for anything and people are sitting there and more people are saying, well, there's advantage to me to just sit on the sidelines and wait because in 3 months' time, these assignments will be worth even less. I'm removing myself from the market. And I was mentioning this just before the podcast. This speaks directly to the concept of immigration that so many of your listeners are going to have internalized over the past 5 years because so many people have spoken to it. Everyone's going to say, but immigration drives demand. Well, no, it doesn't. Immigration drives long-term demand. It does not drive short-term demand because immigrants are very much like us. They don't like losing money. Mm-hmm. And if you perceive that the value of your properties are going to be worth less in a year than they are today, then 1 million immigrants, 2 million immigrants, or 10,000 immigrants, everyone is staying by the sidelines, meaning demand plummets. And we have to wait till we hit bottom of market before the cyclical turn and before the raw immigration numbers then again become a factor in the demand play, which is a long-term thing, not a short-term thing. Realtors really need to understand that. So what's happened now is immigrants and everyone else have started to internalize the idea that we are entering into a downturn. As that happens, more and more, less and less demand from sellers, more and more people trying to liquidate product at the same time. This is causing fundamentally people who were once satisfied to just get back their deposits, enter into a stage about probably 2 months ago where they said, all right, I'll lose my deposits. I want my deposits, but I'll pay my realtor. Then there was the stage of, okay, I'm prepared to lose my deposits. Now I'm seeing I'll lose my deposits and my realtor, and I'll pay the realtor fee. I'm not sure it can really go much below that because at that point, their sunk costs are fully in. And at that point, people start making decisions to simply walk away from deals and say, screw it, the builder can only sue me after mitigating their damage. And they already have 20% of my deposits. So the likelihood is they'll be able to do that. So we're probably at the point where people are just saying, thank you very much. I'm ready to release at base price. And yet still there's no functional substantive demand in the assignment market. Now, this has created that huge problem for those people who are now being forced to close because they no longer have an exit. And those people who actually bought to assign and had no realistic prospect of closing, they're in for a world of hurt, which explains, and I'm sorry, this is a very long answer to your question.
No, it's okay.
Which explains what's going on in my office every single day, 2 or 3 times a day now. We have people who are just failing to close. It is a different world.
So when they say, okay, we're just walking, the builder can sue us. What does that look like for your client? Like, how long does that process take?
Well, it really depends on, okay. Well, the question, how long does the process take, really depends on what the builder's next response is. Is the builder going to sue or not? How long does the court process take? And
is it really likely that the builders sue right now?
Well, so far, we've been experiencing this market for 3 weeks. And in that time, I've had about one person walk away. I'd say once every 2 days or so, people have been walking away. And so far, I've seen one lawsuit hit my desk. There will undoubtedly be more. I mean, it really depends on who the party is. Generally, most lawyers, I mean, if I was a lawyer representing a builder, I wouldn't advise that someone sue right away. I don't understand the purpose. You haven't mitigated your damage at that point. You have 2 years to sue. Also, who is the person before you? So the person who's walking away today is someone who I know very well. He's a realtor. He's a prominent realtor, but he walked away because the corporation, he had a corporation that was buying, and he said, thank you very much. All you can do is sue my corporation. Would the builder be silly enough to go hire Gardner Roberts to engage litigation as against a corporation with no assets? Probably not. Similarly, what happens with my fellows from with $100,000 of income? Well, they have 2 properties. Those properties will be searched by the land registry in 3 seconds through GeoWarehouse or anything else. And despite the fact that they have no income, someone's going to say, okay, but you have assets, so let's go after you. Let's begin the lawsuit. Let's mitigate our damage and move. Yeah. But again, the builder has 2 years to sue. And if they do sue, then you're in for trial. And the way a trial would generally work is through a summary judgment application, usually, which means that you're looking about 6 months till judgment, and that judgment would probably be obtained. So people are in for hurt.
Yeah, sounds like it for sure. So on the other side of it, before people get into contracts, what are reasons why you would tell somebody to walk away from a builder contract?
Before they
sign, like when in their 10-day cooling off period.
Well, I actually, and this isn't going to augur well because I'm on a podcast where everyone is sitting there throwing me the Pickering contracts that are taking place.
Okay.
Pickering Sound.
Yeah.
I have like 15 of them on my desk. I'm making sure that I tell every single person that market conditions have changed. I make sure that I inform everyone of the fact that there are new taxation rules associated with assignments, such that income tax plus HST on the profit is payable. If you think about what that means, by the way, just as an aside, because everyone was making money on the assignments, right? Assignments were the way everyone made money. And the reason that everyone made money is because you paid capital gain on an assignment. So if you bought something for $500,000, you'd sell it for $700,000. You'd make $200,000. Of that, 50%, $100,000 would be included in your income. If you're in the top income bracket, you're paying 54%. So you're paying approximately 54. So 54% of $100,000 is what you're paying to the government. Okay, you're still making $150,000. They changed the tax rules last year such that you're now paying income tax, meaning of the $200,000, that full amount is now subject to 54% tax, but you also have to pay HST on that profit, which means you're paying an effective rate of 67%. So now it's much easier to convince people not to assign because even if they do, there's no profit there. So the first thing you do is you say that, but then you say, look, and here are the specific market conditions. You should understand we are now in a bit of a falling market. The lawyers have a bit of insight into this in a way we haven't in a long time. We're kind of at the bleeding edge in a way that we're not kind of used to, because usually the realtors know what's going on. But we're the ones who are seeing the people who have previously signed these agreements not completing. And we're seeing how bad it's getting, and it is getting very, very bad. I'm not someone who
in your 25 years, have you seen it any?
I've never seen it more perilous than I have presently at this time. This is the most perilous I've seen our industry because Canadians massively overextended themselves well beyond a time period that a normal market would have maintained that exuberance, largely due to government policy as a result of trying to infuse dollars into the Canadian economy during the COVID years. So we massively increased the money supply, the M2 money supply here in Canada. That was used, and can't blame Canadians because there's not really many other things we can invest in. We can invest in stocks or we can invest in real estate, and many of us aren't comfortable in stocks. So we all invest in real estate, and every one of us went into investment properties. And now we are massively overexposed with incomes that have not been remotely comparable to the rise in the real estate values. But
So true.
I'll try to be a bit more joyous, by the way, in some of the other
No,
questions I'm
I
asking.
honestly, I appreciate the honesty because people are not, that's not what people talk about. They try to make it, it's better to be informed so then we know how to navigate the market moving forward. And I think knowing these details will help all of us, including whoever's listening, to help our clients. So those deals that you're doing in Pickering that everybody I've been seeing and their mom selling one, when you tell them that conversation about the tax implications, what is the feedback like now?
Oh, they still go forward.
Okay.
Actually, until you experience personal pain, very few people internalize market lessons, especially because so many of us haven't experienced pain in so many years. I have a client who literally sold a property, an $800,000 property, and he got $50,000 below peak. He wants to return the deposit on this property. He's legally allowed to return the deposit on this property for reasons that have to do with the way that the deal was constructed. But he's also allowed to accept the deposit. And I've said to him straight out, I haven't been having a legal discussion. I said, "Are you crazy? Grab a gift horse. What are you doing?" And he said very bluntly to me, he said, "Listen, I understand that the market's in for some turbulence, but by next year we'll be fine. And then the immigrant argument, and I'll just hold on and it will be worth more in future years. And I'm making a business decision." Okay, fine. Make the business decision. Very few people who are acting today have been through any sort of substantive downturn in the economy, and they don't quite understand what can happen. I haven't either. I'm not pretending that 2001 through 2023 has had any significant downturn. And while there was one in the States, to be sure, that didn't affect Canada. And so the vast majority of the people that I deal with have not really experienced that massive downturn. But if you ask people in the 80s and 89 and others and watched the Reichman debacle and O&Y and other things, I mean, they have a much longer, more permanent scarred memory of what can happen. Mm-hmm. Those folks are ducking for cover, largely out of instinctual memory. Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling that by the time we're through this, not to, again, be too much of a downer, I have a feeling that instinctual memory will be infused into every one of our bloodstreams as well.
2023. I personally, I'll never forget this year.
It very much speaks to the psychology of money. If you've ever read that book, and they talk about how different generations are always going to have different thoughts around money and finances and how they work based on you don't know until you've been in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's the same thing as all of the seminal points in our life, right? Like if you think about marriage, it's like when you think about marriage and you're not married, it's all happiness and roses. But those of us who are actively in a marriage know that perhaps there's more nuance to that, right? Like there's the daily argument, the grind, the raising of kids and everything else. And while you still have this overall picture, it's a much more nuanced picture. So that when someone else who's married speaks to you and says, "Hey, here's an issue," you're able to come at it with a much more understanding and perhaps not, I wouldn't say sympathetic, but understanding is the right word. You have more context, you have more richness, and you're able to approach it in a very different way. Mm-hmm. Same thing with finances. Same thing with what we're about to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question I have that kind of, because people were selling pre-con during COVID like it was nothing. What are levies? What is in a levy, and why do people have to pay them? Because I think agents, myself, I had to learn about it. I had to read about it, but like most people don't understand that. So when they have to explain to their clients at the end of the deal, say you have 5% plus your levies, what's the point of a levy?
Well, first off, there is a misperception that a levy is the adjustments. A levy is but one of many adjustments. And in fact, there are three seminal adjustments that people need to be on the lookout for. There are many, but the three large ones that make their way into almost every agreement are the Section 37 levies, the park levies, and the development charges. Mm-hmm. It is routine for builders to cap development charges in the knowledge that most people will ask for that. Lawyers in the know usually say that's great, but what about the other two large exposures in the form of Section 37 and park levies? In terms of what these things are, allow me to give you an explanation. The City of Toronto until last year, now we've doubled it, charge for every 2 bedrooms that you build in this lovely city of ours, they charge $132,000. That's what they charge. It's a tax.
Each 2-bedroom unit.
Each 2-bedroom unit. It's about $132,000 in Toronto presently. Now that's incorporated in the agreement of purchase and sale. Generally, I'm not talking about the particularities of lawyers who were very smart and adjusted these agreements in some way. I'm just talking about the generalized agreement. So when you pay $800,000 for a condo, $132,000 of that happens to be for what are called development charges. The problem is the city of Toronto does not like raising taxes on people in the form of overt tax raises. So in fact, the city of Toronto has the lowest tax rate in the entire country. I think we're at 0.53 or something is the mill rate. Who knows what it is? But they need to raise money some way. And so they have this great way, which is they just increase development charges well above inflation. Last year, they literally doubled them. They went from $64,000 to $132,000 or something insane. As a result, the builders, and the critical component in understanding this is to understand when these are paid. So the builder has an agreement of purchase and sale dated in 2017 when the building levies were, let's say, $50,000. But those DC charges, as you call them, crystallize at the time that the above grade building permit is pulled. That is to say, after the hole is dug, after the footings and foundations are in, and after they go above ground. At that point, they pay it at the time that it is that they pay it. They use the existing levy. So, as an example, if you went through that 100% increase, which we just went through, and the agreement of purchase and sale incorporated only $64,000 worth of fees, but the builder now needs to pay $132,000 worth of fees, well, the increase in that development fee, because of the time that has elapsed, is what the purchaser is routinely required to pay, and what the builder caps often opts to cap. And so the job of a lawyer is to make sure that those caps are in place, knowing that particularly for projects that take a long time to mature, the crystallization will be significantly after the agreement has been entered into. And similarly for park levies and Section 37 charges, which I could go into as well, and I could give an explanation, but suffice it to say it's all money. All of those things are the things that lawyers seek to cap. And, there's all sorts of other tricks that builders try to use with agreements, but those are largely the 3 that we're looking for by default. And then we kind of look through an agreement's adjustments and we say, okay, is there anything that is not or out of the ordinary, something that isn't standard? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So obviously we are facing incredibly challenging times, and I know that you are not necessarily an economist. However, you did mention, going back to 1989 and 1990 and that sort of market crash. Do you feel that this one will be more so of a crash, less so of a crash? What are your thoughts around it?
I wasn't around in 1989, so it's hard for me to tell. Well, I mean, I was, but I promise you I wasn't paying attention to this stuff. It's hard for me to tell you where we go now. I don't know that. All I know is that every person who does know is someone you should stop listening to. The black swan events, the tipping points and everything else, we're there. We're at a point where it's all well and good to project where we're going to be in 2-3 weeks or maybe even a couple of months, but to project where our economy is going to go, given the variables at play, given the war that's taking place in Europe and how that affects gas prices, given the fact that the Americans are not experiencing the same real estate exposure that we have, and thus have the ability to continue to raise interest rates, and they don't give a crap about what's happening to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Britain, and all the other ancillary countries that did engage in a real estate bubble as a means of propping up their economy. Given that we have systemic exposure to job loss because every single person is exactly now one mortgage payment away from insolvency. I mean, there are so many factors. And given that we have this huge influx of immigrants, the likes of which we have never seen before, 3 times what our expectations were, I mean, who really knows what is going to happen. I'm not certain. I do, however, know that in a very macro sense, everything, whether it's politics, economics, or anything else, it all works in cycles. It's all a cyclical thing. My grandfather taught me this many, many years ago. And we have definitely been on a ride. And that cycle has been going up a hill and up and a hill for what must be almost 15 or 20 years. It would be foolish to think that the cycles that have governed our economy and our political economy for millennia would suddenly stop functioning now. The likelihood of us starting to slide down is larger than the likelihood of us continuing to go up. What that means and what that heralds and how to use that for investment advice, you got to go to people who know more than me.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I understand. Now, we did discuss a little bit about, we discussed a lot about pre-construction, and I know that we've discussed a lot about condominiums. Do you see detached homes or areas outside, I want to call it the rainbow of the GTA, that are a little bit more predisposed to pain as opposed to the condominiums in Toronto?
Oh, they 100% are. I mean,
is there one that is stronger than the other?
Yeah. So I can speak to this part. No problem. The area that is most exposed is the area that has gone up the fastest. And the area that has gone up the fastest is Paris, Ontario. I mean, I'm not picking on you, Paris. I love every one of you. But, but also Clarendon and wherever it is, somewhere outside of London, Ontario. They all experienced, and cottage country, they all experienced massive increases in growth. And anywhere that experienced huge increases in growth is experiencing a corollary decline. And by the way, that is to be expected. I mean, fundamentally, they were on the outskirts. There was no suburban network that kind of kept those prices in check. It was exuberance. And it used to be the case, I don't know if you've heard this expression, but it used to be the case that you would drive till you qualified. But in recent years, it's just been you add people till you qualify, because even if you drove, there was just nothing available. There are people who purchased $2 million homes in North Pickering, like really north. And I'm not knocking North Pickering. It's a lovely, the Rouge River is a lovely place to walk. I love it. It's great. But I think people in Canada have really lost a sense of exactly what $2 million is. And if you want to remember what that is, consider how long it would take you to save $2 million at your present salary after tax. I mean, that just brings it home starkly. How many people who are purchasing these homes could ever pay it back? The answer is probably not many. And so we have to unwind what is really, in Yiddish, we call it I'm allowed to swear a little here, but in Yiddish, we call it a clusterfuck. And that's kind of what we have to unwind here. And where it needs to be most unwound is in these ancillary, low-lying, largely suburban, bordering on rural communities where the price increases were going up the fastest.
Wow. So based off of that answer, so we're discussing a lot about challenges in this market. Do you see opportunities in this market for people who are particularly liquid, I would say?
There's huge opportunities. In fact, there are vast pools of capital that I've been part of discussions with who are waiting on the sidelines to deploy. There are massive amounts of people who have approached builders. And by the way, anyone who's watching this podcast and suddenly comes up with the idea, what I should do is just approach a builder and say, I'm ready to buy out all of the stuff that doesn't close with the 20% discount. I have news for you. These guys have all been approached and they have their own capital pools. People are waiting in the wings. And the only reason that a lot of people haven't pounced is because they don't feel that they're at the nadir. They don't feel that they're at the lowest point in the cycle. There are huge, huge pools of capital ready to be deployed exactly for this, who have been waiting patiently for 10, 15 years, saying our time will come. And yes, there is huge opportunity in so many markets. I mean, we have... Let's go through some of the real estate markets. So the commercial office market is dead. And those people who bought at premium prices are ready to divest at this point because they've had 5 years of losses. And it doesn't look like it's getting any better, even though the downtown is now filling in on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. The retail markets that correlate to those commercial markets, dead.
Although mom and pop retail, strangely, are doing fine. But the big box retails are about to suffer, specifically because we are about to go through what most people believe will be a bit of a recessionary time. Not all big box. Walmart does very well, and so does Dollarama during recessionary times. But many of the big box centers are going to be in trouble. Most importantly, people who have recently purchased any sizable asset. In Canada, remember, we don't have ARM-based mortgages. We don't have the 30. We're all ARM-based mortgages. We don't have 30 years, right? So all you really need to do is just take a look at someone who's purchased a center in 2021 and then basically say, all right, I can see when your mortgage is coming due. Just pull up the charge. Thank you very much. In 3 years, you're going to go from your 4%, because that's was commercial borrowing, to 12%. And there's no way you're going to be able to afford this. There are people who are looking out on these commercial ventures and they're saying, here we go. Also, people with massive land holdings, particularly those people who are indebted with massive land holdings, are hugely exposed. In the residential sphere, well, so many of us now own multiple properties. And any of us who own multiple properties are massively exposed as well, because most of us don't have the incomes to maintain them. You know, it's a bit shocking if you think about it. I mean, they're buying $1 million assets, but what we're talking about is someone who owns $1 million home. Someone owns $1 million home and the interest rate rises from, say, 3% to 7%. You're talking about a difference of $3,000 maybe a month or so. But that's going to topple tons and tons and tons of people, which is weird because we're talking about $1 million asset.
Rental, you can't raise the rent by $3,000.
You can't.
No.
But the whole point is that they don't have the ability to maintain an extra $3,000 a month, and we're talking about $1 million asset. Now that's where the residential area. Where there's huge potential. It's just because people have bought out at their max that they can afford, which was at a 2% interest rate that they believed would go on forever. So yeah, there's huge opportunity out there. Massive pools of capital that are assembling. I haven't seen any of those massive pools moving in yet, but I think that's because people feel that we're just beginning to slide down. But you can count your lucky stars that when they start kind of deploying that capital, because what that means is that they believe that we're at the bottom of the cycle, or that we are at a point where there's real value, and that's the only thing that really turns us around in the headwinds.
So going off of that again, I know you're not an economist, but more so speaking,
I'm pretending to be one.
I like it. I like it. I like it.
You're doing
Excellent.
great.
So speaking to, say, the mom and pop investors, those that did go out and purchase the 2 to 3 investment properties, and they're sitting there kind of, freaking out and battling their fingers here. Do you believe now would be a good time? Because I've heard it, and now would be a good time to potentially sell. I know, yes, the market has come down, but as you're kind of pointing out, we haven't necessarily reached the bottom yet. Would it be an opportune time, do you believe, now for them to sell and then kind of hang tight for a little bit to pick something up later on?
Well, it's totally context dependent, right? Like, I mean, are we talking about someone who needs to sell? Are we talking about someone who can sustain this? Are we talking about someone who took this huge ride up and is now just taking a small hit at the top? Are we talking about someone who purchased above where their sale price will be and thus are not able and cannot afford that hit? With residential people, it's not like commercial investments. Oftentimes you're talking about decisions that will affect them forever. And many people, now on my speed dial, I'm starting to speak more and more with trustees, because many people end up insolvent and then have to restructure their whole life over these simple sales. And so really, I know that this is a bit of a cop-out answer, but there really is no one-size-fits-all answer. It requires in-depth discussion with your realtor, with your lawyer, with trustees in some instances, mortgage brokers certainly, and you'll get a lot of sympathy from all of your professionals, but ultimately that's going to do nothing. What it's going to come down to is the brass tacks of your economic situation.
Got it.
I would love to chime in while we're on the topic of opportunities, just out of curiosity, because I know we've kind of talked a lot of doom and gloom somewhat, if it's not the most ideal for a lot of people right now. But I find when there's opportunities, there's creativity. Have you seen any really creative deals where you're like, wow, good for them?
Okay, so let me first caveat something, and let me tell you that I actually pride myself on being actually pretty optimistic. In fact, I've been doing these types of events and talks on my channel or anywhere else for many years, and I try to be very optimistic when I do. I'm only being pessimistic because I think the times really demand it at this point. This is an exceptional point that I think demands sober reflection on where we are, because we're about to go through what I perceive as a very sharp downturn. And so I just want to be clear. I'm not a downer generally when it comes to real estate. I do experience, see opportunity. And by the way, I see opportunity now to your question. I just want to throw it out there because anyone who's just seeing me for the first time and hearing me be very depressing, this is not a normal state of affairs, which maybe makes it worse.
I just think you're being real.
Okay.
I think you're being, it's the reality of our situation that we're in.
It's the world.
It's not, it's really, you're just giving us the, it's not roses right now, but there is opportunity and we are seeing them online. Like I have seen sales. I was like, oh my God, that's such a good price. That's a 2019 price.
You're taking away the fluff.
Yeah, and that's okay. I agree. I think
you know what?
need
If you gather a whole series of lawyers in the room, you'll find that this depression kind of is very easy to. It's the opposite of realtors. Realtors, there's exuberance, and lawyers are just, we're like all like a bunch of Eeyores who just kind of sit there. To your question about opportunity, because I mean, really, the people who are watching this are saying, okay, in crisis comes opportunity. And that's very true. If you're residential, the opportunity is in the haircuts that people are going to take. And the reality is that people have only started to take those haircuts over the past 2-3 weeks. When interest rates rose, it was kind of like putting your head in the water. We all had our head dunked in the water unexpectedly. And for the first 10 seconds, we all kind of looked around and saw our friends from like waving and like mouthing hello. What you do when your lungs are filled with air, but you're in a new environment. It's fun. But holding your breath for a minute, you start to struggle. And by a minute and a half, you're struggling to get to the surface. We're at a minute and a half now. So the residential opportunity is very clear and transparent. Watch MLS, watch what's happening. And I would also mention one other huge opportunity in the residential sphere in a second, which I actually really want to broach on because I think it's huge. In the commercial sphere, people can hold on a bit longer. I don't know that the deals are replete yet, mainly because those people with assets are saying people are going to try to take advantage of us. Let's sit this out. So they're just able to hold their breath a bit longer. The residential opportunities are presenting themselves before the commercial opportunities are presenting themselves in this market, and people are starting to take advantage of them. The assignments that we're seeing take place are all being done at losses at this point, with very few exceptions, or 2018 pricing, if it makes it more concrete, right? It's 2018 pricing all over again. If you purchase in 2019, 2020, prepare yourself. That's where people are realizing opportunity. There is also, strangely, this is the strangest thing, and I wish people would do a story on this. There is not only opportunity at the bottom of the market, residential market, there is also massive opportunity at the top. Dan Falk actually did a podcast on what happened with Evergrande and Country Garden. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Evergrande and Country Garden, but they're the two largest asset managers in the world. They're the Chinese companies that were, you may have seen it on YouTube, they destroyed whole cities that they had built, like 30 buildings in a row dynamited and things like that. And the reason is because they were massively overexposed and they were trying to limit their exposure such that they could get government money to continue operations. But President Xi, in his wisdom, basically said, thank you very much, we ain't bailing you out. And so, absent government largesse, Evergrande, which is the second largest, Country Garden is the largest, Evergrande went bankrupt. And it filed for bankruptcy in the U.S. Courts about a month ago. At the very time, now Evergrande tried to get exposure over the course of decades to the North American currency basket. And because it plays with billions of dollars, it has no interest in investing in condos of $200,000. It has interests in investing in $10 million at a time. There was a direct correlation that no one has picked up on between the Evergrande filing, which had the trustees for those companies mandate that there be forced liquidation, and the 4 million plus homes going up for sale across not only Toronto, but Boston, New York, everything else. And when you take a look at Bayview and Don Mills, and when you take a look at King County and everything else, and you see how many $5, $6, $7 million homes there are, it is abnormally large. And when I say abnormally large, I mean massively abnormally large. They will take, if it's an Evergrande property, and you can never know because they've all been bought by trustees. If it's an Evergrande property, there is huge opportunity in the upper end of the market as well. Because of the forced liquidation of assets that are taking place, and because of the sheer volume of properties that are there. So if you are residential and you're in high end, now is actually not the worst time as well to be making a serious purchase.
Very
Good to
interesting.
know.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move into a little bit about your social media group. So you created the amazing group. It's called the Real Estate Legal Discussion Group, correct?
Yep, the Ontario Real Estate Legal Discussion Group for
Okay.
professionals.
Okay, amazing. How do you think that changed the trajectory of your career? Did it? Did it not?
Well, I mean, it's an easy source of deals for me because what it means, I mean, if you think about it, I'm a residential real estate lawyer. That's all I do. So people have to give me 10 deals a day for me to have a really great operation going on. And the reason I get 10 deals a day is because I make myself available through education through this forum. Forum presently has, I think, about 14,000 people. I think we're the largest Ontario-based realtor lawyer network in Ontario. And, you know, the good part is that people get as much as they give. I mean, people learn a lot from it. We're a source of positive information for our industry. I pride ourselves on what we've built there. And, you know, we do educational videos and we do write-ups as to what's happening and everything else. And all of that, even though, I mean, I don't advertise it as a vehicle for my business, it flows naturally. It flows very naturally. And similarly, if we're on the subject of social media, and if you want to understand why it is that I'm doing that, I have built, so Facebook, it's very interesting, social media. Facebook, you can assemble a group, but you don't own that group. Facebook owns that group. I can't advertise directly to that group. In fact, if I put an advertisement, if I just write a post, that post doesn't come up at the top. It's an algorithm that Facebook designs that decides where that post is going to come based on likes and everything else. So I've assembled 14,000 people, but I can't directly speak to them. I can't advertise them or anything else. The one thing you can do, though, is you can have an announcement at the very top. And our announcement is a business that I run called Legal Review, where we do 2-hour status reviews. And so every person who actually goes to our site, and most people go once, twice a week at least, see an advertisement for Legal Review, which allows for status certificate reviews, which a whole bunch of lawyers benefit from. It's a lead generation machine, but it also benefits the agents that actually use Legal Review to get these statuses done. And so not only does my office get flooded with deals, which is a nice cash flow that allows me to do whatever it is I do in life, but it also benefits the other businesses that I run, like Legal Review and everything else, based on the way Facebook works. And of course, from Facebook came Twitter, and you know, Twitter is a larger exposure than anything else, and it's a dynamic, engaging place where you learn as much as you contribute.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find the various social media platforms? Do you prefer one over the other? Do you prefer to be on Twitter now as opposed to Facebook? And how does that?
Facebook is old, but old is where money is.
Mm.
So Facebook has an enormous, I don't know for how much longer, but Facebook's reach financially is better than any of the other networks for real estate, because those people who need my services engage with Facebook above all else, which is such a sad indictment of where I am in life. By the way, if you ever want to appear really old, turn to your son or daughter and refer to TikTok as the talk, and they will never speak to you again. The Twitter is the space for discussion. Twitter is the space for, if you follow the right people and if you engage in the right people, it's discussion. So as an example, I actually did Dan Falk and I did his spaces last week. And I just checked, and it turned out 9,000 people tuned in. Now, 9,000 people is almost equivalent to our entire Facebook group. 9,000 people listened to that episode. So it has broader reach, broader expanse for sure. TikTok is a good way of getting known if you don't have a social media presence, because you can grow your social media presence much, much faster on TikTok than any other platform. It goes viral much more easily. And so long as you actually figure out what your angle is, you are golden. You are golden. And like it's remarkable. Like as long as you're consistent to the brand that you're putting out, regardless of whatever your social media platform, you will in fact be successful. I'll give you an example. Just something I saw as I was walking in here. I saw someone say, "You think your date was bad? Listen to this." And it was just her video, her phone on the table, which was positioned at her face. And all you heard was the guy she was with at this date talking about finances, like endlessly, talking about like yield curves and God knows what. And you saw her like trying to be really interesting. And at the end, it ended up with, "So are we going to go back to your place or my place?" And then just stopped. Now, that's funny in and of itself. That's just humorous as a whole. But if you were to make a channel devoted to only that, I guarantee you other people would start contributing and it would become the most popular thing on social media ever.
For sure.
It would just be a channel of only that, of people recording their bad dates. Why? Because it's a common thing that we all experience, we all understand, and we can all laugh at, and it gives us all sort of joy and a voyeuristic sort of approach as well. It hits all of those metrics. Social media gives us that ability to create these types of things that we've never really had the ability to do before. And if you were to do that on TikTok, I guarantee you, your audience would be 100,000 before you knew it. And with that audience, you can do so much. So really, social media gives us the ability to engage in business and virality in ways that, you know, we were never able to dream of before. It's a huge opportunity for those people who embrace it. And anyone who says to you they don't do social or they don't understand this or whatever it is, look at them and say, well, start understanding it. Like that's the only option. You have to, you want to engage in this world, engage in this world. This is our world. So my answer to you is TikTok, most viral, Twitter, most engaging, and you can learn the most from, although who knows how much longer, because Elon is really screwing that thing up. Facebook is where the money is and the old people, but we're in real estate and that's old people. So like, don't discount Facebook. And Snapchat is where everyone hangs out, but I honestly can't figure out what the hell I'm doing on it.
I
So
can't keep up with Snapchat.
I can't figure it out at all. So I made my first Snappy or whatever we call it just like 2 days ago. So I don't know.
At least you're trying.
I did try, but the fact that I called it a Snappy means I'll be booted off the system tomorrow.
When you said the talk, I thought of my parents saying the Google. Can you go on the Google and check this for me?
When I think of Snapchat, all I think of is, you know, having some kind of a puppy dog face and like
Yes.
glasses. That's the extent of Snapchat. That's where it ends for me. So
It's amazing actually. So my daughter and I, so what I haven't talked about is I build businesses and I sell them. That's kind of what I do. Law is kind of cash flow machine for me, and I build businesses and I sell them. And so this summer I engaged in a business with my 13-year-old daughter, and we're building out a social media platform that's launching in 3 weeks actually. And we're kind of excited about it. What's interesting is, so I had we have a full-time team that's building this out. And so we have the Stack developer, and I said, okay, so make the username, the email, and then there we go. And my daughter looked at me and said, what are you talking about? If we put emails in, no one will use them. No one has emails. I said, what do we do? She's like, phone numbers only or snaps. You only communicate through Snap or phone number. Of course, you can't use Snap because it's proprietary. So it's only phone number. And I've learned that the way that kids engage with the world, particularly after building this with her and my business partner's 16-year-old, their assumptions about the world, their assumptions about social media are nowhere close to anything that for me, social media is about information and about money. That's what it is for me. It's about information and money. I have my social network. I'm very happy with it. I have my family, whatever it is. For the 13-year-olds and the 16-year-olds, as we're building out these social media platforms, it's about FOMO, pure and simple. That's it. It is about fear of missing out. And the driver is, you're part of this,
or you're not engaged in life. That's what it is. It's just a different world that people are encountering depending on your age group, depending on your social media network. And striving to understand what that is the essence to being good at, I guess, our professions in today's world.
I have to take a mini dive into that little bomb that you dropped there because business is a passion of mine as well. What sort of businesses do you build? I know we didn't go into that a little bit, but what sort of businesses do you build and what's your sector?
I've had a bunch of businesses. I've had successful and unsuccessful businesses. I came off. So when I was a realtor, I built a company called Slatewood. I had a great time. Slatewood was about redesigning food courts. So I redid the Eden Center and the Yorkdales and everything else. And basically they were trying to figure out how to compete with Amazon, and they discovered food was something that Amazon couldn't do. So they tried to rebuild their food courts. But they realized that when they did that, everyone was McDonald's and A&W and everything else. So I was the regional diversity guy. So I would bring in brands and we would build them, operationalize them, and help them develop and build out through food courts. And that one sold. That was my first business that was successful that sold. I've done things as diverse as build out like physical mailboxes in Chinese. I built them out in China, but they were like electronic iOS mailboxes that you put on your porch. Failed miserably after taking a lot of investor money too. That was 2000. All of 2019 was devoted to that failed project. Legal Review is an example of a business that I've built out. I'm doing the social media with my daughter. I do about one business every year while I'm doing law. It's fun.
That is incredible.
It's a lot of fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's good stuff.
Okay. I
Well,
don't know how you balance it all.
diversification. Yeah.
Yeah. But I try not to speak about that because then people say, why in the world am I going to give you a real estate file if you're busy doing businesses? So it doesn't actually speak.
Fair.
You just don't sleep.
It's your hobby.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly
You're
right.
an
you go.
entrepreneur at heart.
Once we're off the air, I'll show you the new social media app.
Very,
Oh,
very
I love
excited.
that.
So we
Yeah.
can get to that faster. We are at the end, so we are going to reach our rare roundup, which is just 3 quick questions for you to answer kind of as minimally as possible. So your favorite GTA neighborhood, do you have one?
Favorite GTA neighborhood? All right. So yes, I do. I'm a recent convert to Mimico. I love Mimico, and I love particularly by that white bridge. I love all the condos that have gone up, and I love just exploring the restaurants and going for walks within those little places that are there. That's a recent love of mine of a couple of weeks ago. That's obviously my favorite residential neighborhood to live in or anything else. I'm really very partial to the Casa Loma neighborhood at St. Clair and Bathurst. I
Beautiful.
love that area. But the truth is that being part of Toronto is a huge privilege, and there are so many great neighborhoods. And over the course of my 20 years of being here, I've had the privilege of actually loving very many neighborhoods, exploring them, getting to know them. And so if you ask me that question next week, it may very well be different.
Perfect.
Love that. Great answer. And we have established you are quite busy. You have a lot on the go. Do you have a food court favorite fast food go-to yourself?
Well, look, guys, you're never going to answer incorrectly if you say ice cream because it's going to be ice
I like
cream.
that.
I mean, come on.
That's what you do.
If
You-
you're wondering what flavor ice cream, by the way, it's Cherry Jubilee every time.
Oh, I love
Although
that.
I recently have discovered that mango flavored ice cream with the little mango chunks, excellent. Excellent
You're
stuff.
very fruit forward. I tend to lean towards chocolate. but-
Oh no! I'll put the chocolate on, but all right. You see, there's the middle ground right there. That's
Fair
nice.
enough. Fair enough.
Ice cream is a first. You're like,
It
I'm
is.
going
We
to
get a
skip
lot
the
of
meal.
burgers.
We get a lot of burgers.
I'm the first person
A
to say
lot of
ice cream.
burgers. Yeah.
Well, all your previous guests are wrong.
Everybody says, oh, if I'm, yeah. Like,
How'd you know? And then our final question, which we tend to lean towards agents, but in the industry, in the real estate space, what do you think makes an agent, a lawyer, a mortgage broker, a professional rare and unique?
It's very easy to be. All right. I'll answer that. I'm going to answer that, and it's going to be a bit of a complex answer. But the answer is a psychological issue called the authenticity of self. The idea is that many of us, particularly those people who engage voraciously with social media, live different lives. Many people are living a life that they perceive others to expect of them.
There is an authenticity that comes through when you're just comfortable in who you are and what it is you do. And you are not worried about what other people think or what other people or what you believe other people may think even. When you stop going through that mental anguish and trying to kind of create a persona as opposed to just being yourself, that fluency and that authenticity kind of travels through and is apparent to your customers. That combined with care and basic decency means that you are able to deliver on an experience that is true, replicable, and that other people will value. And I find that brings people back to whatever business it is that I engage in every single time.
That was very well said. Thank
Love
you.
that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
With that is a wrap. But if you're listening, please check out the Facebook group.
Ontario Real Estate Legal Discussion Group for Professionals.
I would have said it backwards.
There you go.
And you started a landlord group too.
There is a subgroup for the landlords' tenants, which frankly is much more useful to people because that's what every single question is.
It is like
Amazing.
literally the way it's like a morning read for me, like reading through those like situations people are in. And then I've just learned so much.
May I say, by the way,
Yeah.
I run both these groups with like a whole bevy of people who try. I'm taking credit here, but actually it's many of us
Sandra
that
really is clutch.
Sandra and others, like there are people who just contribute every single time. So I want to make it very clear. There's a group effort.
Teamwork makes the dream
Absolutely.
work. Well, thank
Absolutely.
you so much to everyone who's tuning in. If you are watching or listening, please leave us a review. Go and check out what Mark is up to, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
everybody. Yeah, that was awesome.